My name is Joanne Garcia, and I'm 29 years old. For the past 6 years, my life revolved around Tomas. He wasn't just my boyfriend, he was the center of every plan I made, the blueprint of every dream I nurtured. If you asked anyone who knew us, they'd say we balanced each other. He was wild, creative, untethered. I was steady, pragmatic, always thinking 10 steps ahead. I liked that narrative we complete each other. It sounded romantic, almost cinematic. But now looking back, I realize how dangerous that idea was. Balance is only beautiful when both sides hold weight. I worked harder than I ever admitted. My 9 to 5 as a project manager paid the bills, and on weekends, I freelanced as a designer. Every late night in front of a glowing monitor wasn't just for me. It was for us, for vacations, for nice dinners, for his car payment when he came up short. Tomas's art was his world, and I wanted to believe in it the way he did. He used to laugh about the corporate grind. "Joanne, your soul's too serious," he'd tease, brushing his paint-stained fingers across my cheek. Life isn't about paychecks, it's about passion. And I would smile because I thought we were building the same future just from different materials. He painted with color. I built with numbers. Together we were supposed to create a life neither of us could have alone. On the wall in my home office, I kept a pinned blueprint for our dream house, a craftsman with a sunroom, where Tomas could paint, and a garden I'd fill with herbs and vegetables. The plan was to save enough for a down payment by the end of the year. Every overtime shift, every client project I picked up on weekends, it all flowed into that one goal. Our future. Our forever. But small fractures had begun to form long before I admitted it to myself. It started with the phone, a text that made him smile just a little too long, the way he'd flip the screen face down if I walked into the room. Then there were the walks. At first they were an hour, then 2. Then whole evenings of needing space to clear my head. I told myself not to worry. Everyone needs time alone. Everyone needs friends. But the Tomas I had fallen for used to come home buzzing with stories, spilling his thoughts into my lap like marbles rolling across the floor. Now he guarded them like state secrets. The silence between us was louder than any fight we'd ever had. It all came to a head one Thursday evening. I was hunched over my desk finalizing a client's design mock-up when I heard his closet door slide open. He emerged in a pressed shirt I hadn't seen him wear in months, dark jeans, hair styled with more care than usual. For a moment, I thought he might be taking me out. But when I asked, he said, "I'm meeting Maya. You know she's in my new collective." Maya. That name had been surfacing more and more lately, floating into our conversations like smoke. He spoke about her like she was some kind of muse, an oracle with answers the rest of us were too practical to hear. A visionary, he called her once. I set my pen down and turned in my chair, studying him. "Tomas, you've been different lately." He fiddled with his phone thumb, scrolling without purpose. "Different how? You're distant. You're gone for hours. And when you're here, it feels like you're not." He let out a sharp breath, a frustrated sigh that cut through the room. "Joanne, don't do this. Not tonight." Then when I asked quietly, my voice trembled, but I forced the words out. "Because I can't keep pretending we're fine. I need to know. Is there something going on with you and this Maya?" That was the moment. The pivot. He finally looked up from his phone, and the eyes I met weren't the same ones I'd fallen in love with. There was no warmth, no tenderness, just a flicker of annoyance, like I was a problem he needed to solve quickly. And then he said it. "I don't have to justify my decisions to you, Joanne." The words landed like a blade through my chest. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. My throat was dry, my heart pounding, but no sound came out. He slipped his shoes on, grabbed his jacket, and left the apartment with a slam of the door. The silence afterward was suffocating, yet it was also clarifying. It wasn't the silence of waiting for someone to come back. It was the silence of someone realizing the person they thought they knew was already gone. That night I didn't sleep. I just lay on my back, staring at the faint glow of the city lights filtering through the blinds. I saw the sunroom in my mind, the one I'd planned for him to paint in, the garden I'd dreamed of planting, the shared mornings that would never come. All of it, I realized, was a lie. By dawn, the truth had settled in like frost across glass. My world hadn't shattered. It had dissolved piece by piece until I was left with nothing but the echo of my own plans. And for the first time, I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, that silence could become something else. Not an absence, but a beginning. The morning after that fight, the air in our apartment felt different, thicker, somehow heavy with something unspoken. I stood in the kitchen, fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee I didn't want. The steam curled upward, ghostly, fading into nothing, just like the blueprint of our life together. Tomas shuffled in hair still damp from his shower, wearing the same shirt he'd left in the night before. He didn't look at me. For a long moment, I just studied him. The man who used to kiss my forehead every morning now couldn't even meet my eyes. "So I guess this is it," I finally said. My voice sounded alien, detached, like I was narrating someone else's story. He set his mug down with a clink. "Yeah," he muttered, not even bothering to soften it. "I guess so." The words hit harder than I expected. Maybe because they were so casual, as if 6 years could be folded up and tossed away like last week's grocery list. I tried to hold on to some thread of dignity. We've been saving Tomas, planning. The house, the garden. He cut me off with a shrug. "That's your dream, Joanne, not mine. I can't be tied down like that. My soul needs to breathe." There it was again, his rehearsed language of escape. My soul needs to breathe. As if our relationship were a prison, and I'd been the warden. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "It sounds like your soul needed to breathe with Maya." That finally got his attention. He looked up, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a spark in his eyes. Not love, not regret, but a kind of smug satisfaction. The expression of someone who thought they'd finally outgrown me. "Maya understands me in a way you don't," he said almost proudly. "She's fearless. She lives in the moment. She pushes me to be more than just ordinary." My hands tightened around my coffee mug. I kept my voice even. "And what am I, Tomas?" "You're safe," he said simply. "Dependable. But you're also predictable. You have everything mapped out, 5-year plans, 10-year goals. You'd make someone a great wife one day, Joanne. Just not me. I don't want that kind of life." The hypocrisy burned. Not that kind of life we had spent years dreaming of, that very life together. He had nodded along as I'd budgeted, as I'd drawn floor plans, as I'd promised him stability while he chased his art. Those weren't just my plans, they were ours, or so I thought. I set my mug down carefully, as though it might shatter if I wasn't gentle. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice soft. "You're leaving because I'm steady and she's exciting." He waved a dismissive hand. "Don't twist it. This isn't about you. It's about me. I need to live my truth, and my truth isn't here." A silence stretched between us, taut as a pulled wire. I wanted to yell, to demand explanations, to make him see the years I'd poured into us. But what would it change? His decision had already been made probably weeks ago. All that was left was for me to catch up to the reality he'd already accepted. So instead of anger, I felt something colder, steadier. Acceptance. I turned and walked down the hallway to our bedroom. Each step echoed final, like nails being driven into a coffin. I pulled out a small suitcase and began to pack a few clothes, my laptop, my toothbrush, nothing more. The furniture, the decorations, the countless items I'd bought to make this place a home, I left them. They weren't mine anymore. They belonged to the ghost of the life we never really had. When I emerged, he was still in the kitchen, scrolling idly through his phone as if waiting for me to beg. I didn't. I pulled my apartment key from my pocket and set it gently on the counter next to his coffee. The metallic clink was louder than any argument could have been. For the first time, he looked unsettled. His smirk faltered. But I didn't give him the satisfaction of words. I just shouldered my bag and walked to the door. The soft click as it closed behind me was the end of everything. The first few nights blurred together. I slept on my friend Claire's couch, her dog curling at my feet, as if sensing I needed something warm beside me. Every morning I woke with a hollow ache in my chest. But alongside that ache was something else: silence. No buzzing phone, no constant stream of texts demanding my attention, no guessing games about where Tomas was or who he was with. Just silence. At first it stung. The absence of him was everywhere, in the empty bed, in the lack of goodnight texts, in the quiet dinners for one. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, that silence began to feel different, lighter. For the first time in years, I didn't have to orbit someone else's chaos. I didn't have to worry about keeping him grounded or making sure the bills were paid. I was free. A week later, I found a new apartment. It was smaller, a little more expensive, but it was mine. I painted the walls the deep teal I loved, not the muted beige Tomas once insisted was spiritually calming. I bought tools instead of new furniture and built myself a custom workbench for the woodworking projects I'd abandoned years ago. The hum of a saw, the scent of fresh-cut oak. It filled my evenings with something that wasn't grief, wasn't longing. It was creation, my creation. I could feel the old me, the Joanne, who once had hobbies and passions, before she became Thomas's safety net slowly resurfacing. But in the quiet hours when the sawdust settled and the night grew still, the memories returned. His dismissive smile, the smug way he said Maya's name, the way he reduced 6 years to nothing more than a detour on his path to freedom. And though I tried not to admit it, the whispers in the back of my mind began again. Questions, suspicions, a low hum of dread. What if his so-called freedom wasn't what it seemed? What if the life he chased wasn't the liberation he imagined, but a trap? I shook off the thought, pushing it down. It wasn't my problem anymore. At least that's what I told myself. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds of Claire's living room, painting narrow stripes across the couch where I had tossed and turned all night. Her dog Murphy stirred at my feet and pressed his warm head against my ankle, as if sensing the heaviness in me. I had left Tomas behind, left the key, left the blueprint of our life. Yet as I sat up and rubbed my tired eyes, I realized it still didn't feel real. It was like I'd stepped out of my own skin and was watching someone else's life crumble from afar. Claire padded into the room in slippers, a mug of tea in her hand. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice soft, cautious. I wanted to lie to say I was fine, but my throat ached with honesty. It feels like I died. Like everything I worked for doesn't exist anymore. She sat down beside me, her free hand resting gently on my shoulder. "You didn't die, Joanne. You just shed something that wasn't meant for you." I nodded, but the words slid off me. All I could see was Tomas's face, as he told me Maya understood him as if I had been nothing more than training wheels for his real life. Later that day, I went back to the apartment to collect the rest of my things. Tomas was there leaning against the counter like nothing had changed, sipping his coffee. He didn't look up as I walked in. The silence between us was suffocating. I set my duffel bag down and began moving through the rooms methodically. My clothes, my books, the framed photograph of my parents that had hung on the dresser. Every item I touched felt like an indictment. "This was yours, Joanne. Yours to carry, never ours." When I reached the office, I paused in front of the blueprint, the craftsman house, the little sunroom where he was supposed to paint, the garden I had promised myself. My chest tightened. I tore it from the wall, folded it carefully, and slid it into my bag. That dream might be shattered, but it was mine. I wasn't leaving it behind. As I zipped the bag shut, Tomas finally spoke. "So this is it then?" I turned, keeping my voice as even as I could. "You made your choice." He set his mug down with a sharp clink. "You always were dramatic. I told you I need freedom. I can't be tied down to mortgages and timelines. Maya, she gets it. She's not afraid to take risks." I studied him for a long moment. His face, once familiar, was now a stranger's mask, cold, self-satisfied, convinced he had won something. "Then I hope those risks are worth what you threw away," I said quietly. His smile widened, almost triumphant, as if my calmness were proof of his superiority. He wanted me to break, to scream, to cry. That would make me predictable, the Joanne he thought he knew. But I didn't give him that. I slung my bag over my shoulder, walked past him without another word, and closed the door behind me. That night, back on Claire's couch, I lay awake listening to the hum of the city beyond her window. It wasn't silence anymore, it was emptiness. I thought of the nights Tomas used to curl around me, his breath warm against my neck, murmuring promises of forever. I thought of the mornings we planned out grocery lists and talked about which plants we'd grow in the garden. I thought of all the laughter that once filled our kitchen, now reduced to echoes. Tears welled hot and relentless, soaking into the pillow beneath me. I didn't sob. The sound was quieter, more dangerous, like a leak in a dam. Murphy padded closer, pressing himself against my chest until his weight anchored me. I buried my face in his fur and let the grief flow. The following days blurred together. I went through the motions at work, answering emails, attending meetings, nodding at all the right times. But beneath the surface, I was hollow. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be Tomas, some apology, some attempt at reconciliation. But it never was. And maybe that was worse. To be discarded so thoroughly, so completely, as if 6 years had meant nothing. I scrolled through old photos one night, torturing myself with images of us, on vacations at birthdays during quiet nights on the couch, his arm around me, his grin wide, his eyes alight with affection that now felt counterfeit. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I powered it off and shoved it in a drawer. A week later, I signed the lease on my new apartment. It wasn't much, two small rooms, outdated fixtures, and rent that made me wince, but when I stepped inside for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Possibility. The walls were bare, begging for color. The windows opened onto a courtyard that smelled faintly of jasmine. The floors creaked, but the sound wasn't annoying. It was grounding, like the heartbeat of a space that belonged only to me. I sat cross-legged in the center of the empty living room, the keys warm in my palm, and whispered to myself, "This is mine." For the first time since leaving Tomas, I felt a flicker of hope. Of course, hope didn't erase pain. That night, lying alone on a mattress, I dragged into the corner. The grief returned. My body ached for the shape of another beside me. My mind replayed Tomas's words in a cruel loop. "She understands me. You're predictable." I pressed a hand against my chest as if I could hold my heart in place. The silence was no longer suffocating, but it was still vast, still heavy. And yet beneath the sorrow, something stirred, a quiet defiance. I had been Tomas's anchor for years, his stability, his foundation. He had chosen to walk away. Fine, let him. Now I would learn to be my own anchor. In the weeks that followed, I filled the apartment with pieces of myself. I painted the bedroom a shade of teal Tomas had once called too cold. I built a workbench in the living room, the sound of my saw replacing the sound of his laughter. I cooked dinners for one and discovered the strange joy of eating exactly what I wanted when I wanted it. It wasn't easy. Grief clung like a shadow, but every day it thinned a little more. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the whispers of doubt began to shift. No longer, why wasn't I enough, but what could I become now that I'm free? Still in the quiet moments, the memory of Tomas's smug smile haunted me. His words, his certainty, that Maya was the one who understood him, echoed in my mind like a taunt. It was almost a relief when the whispers from outside reached me, a mutual friend hinting that Tomas's grand new life might not be the liberation he'd promised himself. At the time, I brushed it off. I told myself I didn't care, that it wasn't my problem anymore. But deep down, a seed had been planted, a seed that would soon grow into something I hadn't expected: vindication. The weeks after moving into my new apartment were a strange blend of grief and rebirth. At first, the place felt like a cavern. The walls echoed when I spoke. The refrigerator hummed too loudly. At night, I lay awake listening to every creak, every gust of wind pressing against the old windows. Silence wasn't the balm I thought it would be. It was a weight pressing against my chest. But slowly I began to bend that silence into something else. One Saturday morning, I unrolled a tarp across the living room floor and set up the tools I hadn't touched in years. The first slice of the saw through oak filled the room with a sound I had almost forgotten: the growl of creation, the hum of possibility. Sawdust floated in the air, catching the sunlight like flecks of gold. For hours I lost myself in the rhythm of it: the scrape of sandpaper, the sharp scent of wood, the soft thud of hammer against nail. It was messy, exhausting, imperfect, and it was mine. When I stepped back from the workbench, I had built a sturdy, simple structure with clean lines. I felt something bloom in my chest: pride. Not the brittle pride I used to feel when Tomas praised me for keeping us together, but something solid-rooted. I hadn't just built a workbench. I had built proof that I could create a life without him. I threw myself into freelance work too. With no one draining my bank account, every dollar I earned went directly into my savings. Clients came by word of mouth. Soon I was juggling so many projects that my evenings blurred into a parade of sketches, drafts, and video calls. And at my day job, my boss noticed the difference. Without the constant tug of Tomas's needs, I had more focus, more energy, more drive. Within a few months, I was promoted, an achievement I hadn't even realized I was capable of because I'd been too busy holding someone else up. The irony stung. For years, I'd been told I was too predictable, too safe. Yet here I was, thriving without him, while his so-called spontaneity had led him. Where exactly? Despite everything, Tomas still haunted me. When I walked past a cafe we used to visit, I'd hear his laugh in my head. When I saw a couple holding hands, I'd picture us. Sometimes in the dead of night, I'd wake and half expect to find him beside me, sprawled across the sheets, his breath warm against my neck. But then I'd roll over and see the empty space, and the grief would morph into something else: clarity. I didn't miss him. I missed the woman I thought I was when I was with him. And now I was starting to realize I didn't need him to be her. The first whisper of his unraveling came during a phone call with an old mutual friend, Rick. We hadn't spoken much since the breakup. He had always been closer to Tomas's circle, so when his name lit up my screen, I hesitated before answering. "Joanne," he said almost cautiously, "how are you doing?" "I'm fine," I replied, though my voice betrayed the lie. He hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Look, I don't want to stir things up, but I think you should know what's going on with Tomas." My chest tightened. "What about him?" "You've heard of that art collective he was bragging about, right? With Maya." The name alone was enough to make my stomach clench. "Yeah." "Well, it's not exactly what he made it sound like." Rick paused as if weighing whether to go on. He convinced her to put a ton of her savings into some kind of, I don't even know, a visionary project. He promised crazy returns. But the project doesn't exist. He took the money and disappeared. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. He what? Gone. Vanished. Maya's been calling everyone crying, begging for help. He even sold her car. From what I hear, she's broke, completely screwed. I sank into my chair phone, pressed to my ear, listening to the words without fully absorbing them. Tomas, the man who had looked me in the eye and said his soul needed to breathe, had exhaled himself straight into a con. Rick kept talking, filling the silence. "I figured you'd want to know. People are saying Maya's devastated that she can't pay her rent, that her credit cards are maxed out. She's reaching out to anyone who'll listen." I stared at the grain of the wooden table in front of me, my thumb tracing its lines. I felt nothing. No surge of vindication, no gleeful satisfaction, just a deep, quiet sense of closure. That night I worked late at my bench, sanding the edges of a new project. Each stroke of the sandpaper was steady, deliberate, drowning out the chaos of the story I'd just heard. Tomas had left me for a fantasy, and the fantasy had crumbled into dust. The universe had balanced the scales without my help. For the first time since leaving him, I didn't feel like a victim. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt free. In the days that followed, more whispers reached me. Friends of friends saying Maya had been humiliated, that she'd been trying to sell her paintings online but no one was buying, that she had even called her parents asking for money. I ignored it all. It wasn't my problem, it wasn't my responsibility, and most importantly, it wasn't my life anymore. One evening, as I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker on, I realized something startling. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Not happy, not healed, not yet, but calm. And calm, I decided, was a beginning. The phone buzzed late on a Tuesday evening. I was at my workbench, smoothing the edges of a cherrywood shelf, the room filled with the scent of sawdust and lemon oil. The name flashing on my screen stopped me cold. Leah, one of Tomas's old friends. We hadn't spoken since the breakup. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in me, a mix of curiosity and wariness, made me swipe to answer. "Joanne." Her voice was sharp, almost frantic. "You won't believe what's happened." I set the sandpaper down and leaned back against the bench. "I can guess, but go on." "It's Thomas," she said, breathless. "He disappeared. Just gone. Maya's been blowing up everyone's phones. Apparently he took off with all the money she gave him for that so-called art investment. It was a scam." A strange calm washed over me. How much? Everything. Her savings, her grandmother's jewelry, even her car. He sold it behind her back. She's drowning in debt. I mean, she's literally begging people for help. Leah's words tumbled out, each one a brick, stacking higher. But instead of crushing me, they built a wall of distance between them, between him and me. "Joanne, she's a mess," Leah continued. "I almost feel bad for her, but Tomas, he's vanished. Deleted his socials, changed his number. No one knows where he is." I closed my eyes, inhaling the dusty, grounding air of my apartment. My hand drifted back to the wood I'd been sanding, fingers brushing over the smooth surface. A rhythm formed in my chest, steady and strong, as if my heart had aligned with the grain. "I see," I said simply. Leah paused, maybe expecting anger or satisfaction. "That's all you have to say. What else is there to say?" My voice was quiet but certain. He made his choice. Now he's living with it. And so is she. After the call, I stood at the window, staring at the city glowing beneath me. Once the thought of Tomas betraying me had been unbearable. Now the reality of him betraying someone else didn't even sting. If anything, it clarified the truth I'd been too blind to see. It was never about me not being enough. It was about him being less. Less honest, less committed, less of a man than I had built him up to be. The whispers grew louder in the following days. Mutual acquaintances mentioned Maya was pawning off her paintings online, slashing prices just to make rent. Others said she'd been seen in the neighborhood, hair tangled, eyes wild, asking around for loans. One night, Rick called again. She even reached out to my parents, he said incredulously, crying about how Tomas ruined her life. Can you believe that? I chuckled under my breath, surprising both of us. Yes, I can believe it. There was a pause. You don't feel sorry for her? I thought about it, truly thought about it. Once maybe I would have. Once I might have rushed in desperate to rescue, to comfort, to forgive. But not anymore. No, I said finally, not even a little. What struck me wasn't joy at her downfall. It wasn't vindication or revenge. It was peace. The betrayal had once been an open wound. But this news, the truth of Tomas's con, was the final stitch. The skin had closed. The scar remained, but the pain was gone. I didn't need to punish him. The world had done it for me. Weeks slipped by. I kept working. My savings grew. My apartment filled with the warmth of new projects, new furniture built by my own hands, new routines that belonged only to me. But then the silence broke. The first message came late one Friday night, a number I didn't recognize. Hey, it's Maya. I know you probably hate me, but I need your help. I stared at the words, thumb hovering over the screen. My heart didn't race. My stomach didn't twist. I simply deleted the message. The next day another came. Please, Joanne. I made a mistake. I see that now. Can we talk just once? Delete. By the third day, her tone shifted. He ruined me. I have nothing. I don't know where else to go. Please. You're the only one who understands. I set the phone down, exhaling slowly. She was wrong. I didn't understand not anymore. I had left that world and I wasn't going back. But the pleas didn't stop. Calls from unknown numbers. Voicemails of sobbing, of frantic explanations. Apologies tangled with excuses. I was lost. He tricked me. I thought he loved me. Sometimes her voice cracked so violently it was almost unrecognizable. Other times she slipped into flattery. You were always so strong, so smart. I should have listened to you. I blocked every number, deleted every message. Each action was another stone placed firmly on the boundary I was building between myself and the wreckage of my past. Then came the pressure from others. Leah messaged again. She really needs a friend, Joanne. I know things ended badly, but you two were close once. Can't you just talk to her? Rick called to say Maya had shown up at his office crying in the lobby, insisting she had nowhere else to go. Even Claire shook her head when I told her. You're stronger than I am, I'd probably cave, but I get it, you don't owe her anything. That word owe clung to me. No, I didn't owe her, or Tomas, or anyone. For years I had been the dependable one, the rock, the anchor. And where had it left me? Broken. Not anymore. One evening, after ignoring another string of desperate calls, I returned to my bench. The half-finished shelf waited for me, patient and unassuming. I ran my fingers along the smooth edge, listening to the silence around me. The only sound was the steady rhythm of my own breath. And in that moment, I realized I didn't just survive Tomas's betrayal, I had outgrown it. The world had shown me who he really was, who Maya really was, and who I no longer had to be. The night air outside my apartment had grown cooler. Autumn had crept into the city, quietly painting the trees gold and rust. I sat by the window with a mug of tea, my phone face down on the table. It buzzed once, twice, then again. Different numbers, same desperation. Joanne, please, just hear me out. I know I hurt you, but I've lost everything. You're the only one who can understand what he did to me. I read the first few, then stopped. Delete, block, delete, block. The cycle became as routine as brushing my teeth. But the messages didn't fade, they multiplied. Soon the calls came not just from Maya, but from her friends. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered my number. Joanne, come on, one voicemail began dripping with forced sweetness. She's in such a fragile place. Don't you think she's been punished enough? Another text arrived from an old acquaintance. You two were like sisters once. Doesn't that mean anything? I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Sisters. The irony burned. A sister doesn't steal the life you built. A sister doesn't gloat while she takes what you loved. No, whatever Maya had been to me, it wasn't family. The final push came from her mother. I answered only because the number was familiar. I had met the woman once, years ago, at an art show Tomas dragged me to. Her voice was sharp cold, the kind of tone honed from a lifetime of getting what she wanted. Joanne, I can't believe you, she snapped. Maya is in pieces and you refuse to help her, after all the time you two spent together. With all due respect, I said evenly, Maya's problems aren't mine to fix. That's heartless. You know what Tomas did to her. She trusted him and now she has no one. She had someone, I reminded her quietly. She had me, and she threw me away. There was a stunned pause followed by a scoff. So you're just going to let her spiral? You think that makes you better than her? I almost laughed. Better no, just freer. I'm not her keeper, I said, my voice steady, and neither are you. If she wants to rebuild her life, she'll have to do it herself. Before she could respond, I ended the call and blocked the number. My hand trembled slightly, but not from fear, from relief. One more chain severed. Still, Maya's persistence escalated. Her text shifted from pleading to bitter. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? You're nothing without him. At least I lived. Coward. Predictable little coward. You'll die alone. Each message was like watching her peel away another layer of her mask. The confident, arrogant woman who once paraded Thomas in front of me was gone. What remained was raw, unraveling, desperate. And strangely, that made it easier to ignore her. By then, my own life had begun to quietly expand. I wasn't dating seriously, but I'd started saying yes to invitations again. Coffee with coworkers, gallery openings, a trivia night at a bar down the street. I laughed more, even flirted once or twice. But more importantly, I was learning to enjoy my own company. Saturday mornings spent running through the park. Evenings at my bench, hands stained with wood dust. Dinners cooked to my own taste, eaten in the quiet satisfaction of knowing no one else had a claim to my effort. Every small act of independence was a brick in the fortress I was building around my peace. Until one morning, 6 months after I left Thomas, the ghost of my past materialized in flesh. I had just finished a run sweat cooling on my skin as I rounded the corner to my building. My breath came steady, my muscles humming with exertion. For once, my mind was blissfully empty. Then I saw her. Maya stood across the street, arms wrapped around herself, hair a tangled mess. The crisp blazer she used to flaunt at exhibitions had been replaced with a thin, wrinkled sweater. Her eyes, once alight with smugness, were hollow, ringed with shadows. For a second, I froze. It was like watching a ghost step out of memory and into daylight. She spotted me immediately. Her lips parted and her voice cracked across the quiet street. Joanne. I adjusted my headphones, pretending I hadn't heard. But she darted forward, crossing traffic without looking desperation in every step. Joanne, please wait. I stopped my heartbeat not from the run, but from the sudden collision of past and present. She stood inches away, trembling tears streaking down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, she sobbed, voice breaking. I was stupid. I was arrogant. I thought Tomas was everything, and now he ruined me. He took everything, my savings, my cards, my car. I have nowhere to go. Her hand reached out, fingers trembling as if trying to grasp the version of me she once mocked. I shifted slightly, creating an invisible barrier between us. My voice was calm, quiet, but firm. What do you want from me, Maya? Just a place to stay. A couch. Just until I get back on my feet. You were my home once. Home. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. I stared at her, the woman who had once smiled with triumph, as she took Tomas from me, now reduced to this hollow figure begging for shelter. And in that moment, I realized the truth. She wasn't a ghost. She was just a person. Broken. Fallible. And no longer my responsibility. I took a deep breath. Do you remember when you said I was too safe? Too predictable? When you told me I didn't understand freedom the way you did? Her eyes widened. She flinched as if the words themselves were knives. This, I gestured toward her, this is your freedom, and it has nothing to do with me. Her tears fell harder. Please, don't do this. I don't have anyone else. But I only shook my head. I'm not your safety net. Not now. Not ever again. Her sob echoed behind me as I walked past keys clutched in my fist. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of the past lifting thread by thread, as if I had finally cut the last tie binding me to her shadow. Maya's sobs trailed behind me as I climbed the steps to my apartment building. My hand trembled only slightly as I slid the key into the lock, but it wasn't fear. It was the last shiver of an old life breaking apart. Joanne. Her voice cracked across the courtyard. Don't walk away from me. Not after everything we've been through. I turned slowly, meeting her eyes one last time. She was shaking mascara streaking down her face, her thin sweater clinging to her frame like a desperate shield. Everything about her screamed lost. But instead of pity, I felt clarity. She staggered closer, clutching her arms. I know I was cruel. I know I hurt you, but I was stupid blind. Tomas tricked me. He took everything. Please, Joanne, I need a place to breathe. Just for a while. I let her words hang in the air, heavy and trembling. Then I asked quietly, Do you remember what you told me the night you left with him? Her breath hitched. She looked away. You said you didn't have to justify your decisions to me. My voice was calm, steady. And you were right. You didn't. You made your choice. And this, I gestured to her crumpled figure. This is the consequence of it. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. That wasn't the real me. I cut her off. It was exactly who you are. The woman who threw away 6 years of my life for a man who whispered pretty lies. The woman who thought she was superior, enlightened, free. And now you want me to be the foundation you can crawl back to. Her desperation shifted like a storm changing direction. Her face twisted, her voice sharp. So that's it. You'll just let me be homeless. You always thought you were better than me. But you're not. You're just empty, predictable, alone. The words should have pierced me. Once they would have. But now they slid off me like rain on glass. I even smiled a small, real smile that didn't reach my eyes. You're right about one thing I said. I am alone. But it's the kind of alone I chose, not the kind that was forced on me. There's a difference. For a heartbeat, silence filled the courtyard. The hum of a passing car, the rustle of dry leaves across the pavement. Maya's face crumpled again, her anger collapsing into hopelessness. Please, she whispered, her voice almost gone. I have nowhere to go. I studied her. Really studied her. This wasn't the smug, victorious woman who had stood at Tomas's side months ago. This wasn't even the rival who once mocked my plans for being too safe. This was a stranger, a hollow shell. And I realized something. I didn't hate her. I didn't pity her. I didn't feel anything at all. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said finally. My voice wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was final. Her lips parted as if to respond, but no sound came out. I turned back to the door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. The door closed with a soft click, cutting off her presence like a thread snipped clean. Inside my apartment was warm golden with the glow of lamps. My workbench waited by the window, the half-finished project steady and patient. I set my keys on the table and leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. The quiet settled around me, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. It was mine. I thought back to who I had been 6 months earlier, Joanne the planner. Joanne the anchor. Joanne, who lived to steady Tomas's chaos. That version of me was gone, buried in the rubble of a life I no longer wanted. What remained was someone new, someone strong, someone who had chosen herself finally. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood on the balcony, the city sprawling beneath me. The air was cool, the streets alive with movement. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to come home. I was already home. I lifted the glass in a quiet toast to the skyline, to freedom, to closure, to the life I was building with my own 2 hands. And as I sipped, a thought crossed my mind, a truth so sharp it almost made me laugh. Tomas had once accused me of being predictable. Maya had mocked me for being safe. But in the end, their chaos had destroyed them. And my predictability, it had saved me. When I finally went to bed, the sheets smelled faintly of lavender. I slid beneath them, stretched out across the mattress, and closed my eyes. For the first time in a very long time, I slept deeply. Without dreams, without ghosts.